Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work podcast. If I had to come up with one word to describe what we're going to talk about today, it will be the future. And more importantly, the future of industries such as real estate, finance, and how combination of finance, real estate, and tech, which would be here a long word, digitalization, I guess you can say, which in other words, innovations that come to the market will actually change how we approach those industries, those large, huge, old school, you can say, industries. So this is one of the things we're going to talk about. On top of that, I guess makes traveling across multiple continents seem like it's a walk to your local grocery store. I would like to learn more about the impact of networking and how the network in 2025 and beyond, how to actually make it possible to travel and then benefit from it to those all interesting, all kinds of interesting places worldwide or around the globe. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation. Without any further ado, Matt, please introduce yourself and the company you represent, and we'll kick it off with that.
Matt, thanks for having me on the show. I will do you one better. When we talk about the future, some people might not recognize because sometimes I let my beard get pretty scruffy, but I'm Gen Z. So I do represent the future workforce, the future leadership
100%.
that will ascend a lot of these industries. I don't always put it out there that I'm so young, but I thought it was appropriate to slip in right off the bat. I mean, people will discount you quite a bit looking at your age and thinking that I don't know anything. What do I know? I wasn't even around when 9/11 happened. So it's sort of a shock to a lot of folks. But at the same time, I do hope that I'm a good representative of this generation or the better half of it, and that can inspire some people and certainly tune them into some of the ways that some of the mentalities that our generation has, how we're looking at these legacy industries and maybe disrupting the status quo a little bit. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but I think that's a perfect segue into the work that I do. So my name is Matthew Schneider. I am the founder and CEO of Building Inc. And you can find us at www.building.inc. But essentially what we do is organize, verify, and activate real estate data. And the way that I got into this started 5 years ago. That was the beginning. Actually, that wasn't the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I feel like I've always had it in me. When I was still in elementary school, I was programming and I was putting together game servers. I would go to school with a poster and I'd tell people to join my servers. And then I would create hierarchies and ranks and plugins and whatnot. So I feel like I got my kickstart there and just monetizing communities as a youngster. Eventually, I published a book that was in high school. I stopped doing my homework. I'd go home and I was working on a manuscript for a science fiction novel. It accumulated a whole bunch of chapters, 90,000 words, and I thought this is probably decent enough to send off to an agent. I wasn't able to find an agent, but I was able to find a publisher, and they were actually called Gen Z Publishing, so it was very fitting. And they thought, hey, we don't have too many 17-year-olds submitting manuscripts. They helped me revise it, and then we published it. And it was a real paperback novel, not just a digital release. And I got some folks to purchase it. Not too many folks, because not everyone reads books. And certainly not ones that read as if you were playing a video game. I certainly let my imagination run. Someone described it as like pulp fiction, but in a text format. So it was exciting. It was thrilling. That was a big milestone for me, but it wasn't wasn't the hill that I wanted to die on. So I got into music after that, published a bunch of music, fun, but wasn't where I wanted to go. I still perform music, but monetizing it and breaking into that scene is a whole different story. A real combination. And in some ways, I don't even know what genre I would place it in, which was sort of an identity crisis for my music artist persona. I wasn't sure what type of music I liked. I mean, I really enjoyed electronic and rock, but also ambient and instrumental. So I was releasing all sorts of stuff that it didn't have a distinct personality. And so people would put on one track and think, okay, this is cool. Go to the next track and think, I have no idea what I'm listening to. Like, who is Matt Schneider as an artist? So it was fun while it lasted. It was more of an experiment. I think that's the way that I would describe it, that the whole process was experimental. Can I produce music? Can I put it out on platforms? Will it rack up some streams? And just see how far I would get with that. I was doing some content creation at that time as well. And now I've come full circle where I'm kind of kickstarting that influencer or content creator personality or side gig. again because it complements what I do, especially the international travel. But after that, I graduated high school early. I jumped right into day trading. I had co-founded a group with some classmates which would release signals in the market. So we were doing technical and fundamental analysis on both blue chip and penny stocks, finding trends, calling them out, taking trades on that. Some equities, but a lot of options contracts, and seeing could we get rich with it. And no, I did not get rich, but I did learn a lot from it. And I think it's been such a cornerstone of my entrepreneurial journey because it taught me a lot about finance. And at any point, if you want to dive into any of these topics, because they can be interesting, just let me know. I went from day trading into real estate after that because I just couldn't consistently make money. And I thought, I need a better market to be into or to get into. I found real estate. I knew some folks who were investing in it as limited partners in syndications. So they were just passively putting money into these real estate projects and letting their wealth accrue over time. But they were running into this caveat that the barrier to entry was quite high. They all needed accreditation status. And two, the check sizes, the minimum check sizes were $50,000 to $100,000 per deal. So we started to think, is there a way that we could fractionalize this further? And if so, is this a regulatory issue? Is it a technology issue? And at the time, we settled with technology being the solution to this. Now I don't really feel that that is the case, but we embarked on that journey anyways. And that was the first time that I wore the CEO badge. I'd started a company, had my co-founder, and we started developing a product to democratize the real estate investment process. And I was much more comfortable being in this market because I also saw it as an industry. Real estate, of course, you invest into it, but you can look at what's happening behind the scenes and it becomes much more interesting when you see it as this combination of construction, supply chain, and syndication and maintenance and operations and management. It's a very sophisticated industry as much as it is just a market where money is moving. I worked on that for a couple years, and that was 2020, 2021, and so on. And then we hit some roadblocks, as I think a lot of startups do. We were short on cash. We didn't feel that we had a product that was resonating with customers. We overestimated the size of the problem and overestimated the role of technology in solving that problem. Just because you have a product or a new approach to something doesn't mean that you're going to revolutionize the world. You have to understand regulation and processes and human nature, and also just what people are willing to spend in order to get things done. And if it's not a hair on fire problem, they don't really pursue it. On top of that, it was a marketplace. So we would bring on projects, help them fractionalize ownership, and then we had to connect them to investors. So I was sort of acting as a broker dealer that was not licensed, and we had this fund of fund models. So very, very convoluted stuff. And eventually I needed to pivot, and that led into building. I took some time, did a lot of market research. I had accumulated my thousands of hours, and I said, okay, what's a real problem that's worth solving? What are people actually going to pay for? What have I learned about the industries that I'm in and about myself? And now how do I put it all together to build something successful?
Wow. Let me figure out the lighting situation here, but I'm kind of speechless here, Matt, because you revealed to us your age in the beginning of this conversation, and yet after that, what followed then was a sequence of different characters that you developed over this time, and so many different industries, so many different things, complex things that you've touched on in that time period, which is incredible. I mean, most people, I don't want to overgeneralize here, but I can definitely say majority of us out there will never use our lifetime to do what you've done in the last, I guess, decade, or probably a little bit less than a decade. So that's incredible, first of all. We're going to talk about building that in a second. I'm really curious to find out, since the moment I met you, I had this question in my head and I wanted to leave it for the conversation we're going to record actually. Where did you learn to speak so well? You speak with elocution, it stands out. It's incredible how you are able to explain complex things in simple terms and make it so easy to listen to as well. Was it intentional? Are you practicing it? I know I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you've gone through several courses on from nice institutions out there. So I'm curious to hear, where does this come from? And I know you're doing public speaking as well. So I'm curious to hear your story, your take on that.
That's been quite an evolution as well. and an interesting one because as a very young child, I had a speech problem. Then growing up, I was quite introverted, shy, awkward, and now I'm this extroverted, life of the party, traveling the world, hosting podcasts, going on podcasts, closing deals, tapping back into that influencer spirit and trying to put myself out there. So it's quite a 180 would be the right way to describe it. Like, how did we turn around and get to where I am now? And to be honest, I don't 100% know. I would say that it's been an aggregate of incremental gains. So little bits of improvement here or there over the years, but always putting myself in uncomfortable positions that would improve my skills in some way. Little insight, that's actually why I started my own podcast. I was going on podcasts, I've been doing interviews for a while, and I wanted to position myself as more of a subject matter expert in the industry. But I really wanted to push my interviewing skills. It's one thing to be interviewed, but it's another thing to come up with questions on the spot, to think of something insightful, and to be just as entertaining as your guest, or else you get these, you're interrupting the flow of the conversation, essentially. So I started that more recently. Before that, I think I just realized that this was one of my better skills. And I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it was the transmutation of my writing skill, where I had colorful vocabulary and I was great at grammar. And then I realized, well, how can I talk the same way that I write? I'm good at writing, so I know that my brain works that way. How do I get it so that I just vocalize what I'm writing? And I started to lean into that. I wouldn't say that there was any sort of method to the madness. It just evolved over time. And I thought, okay, you know what? I'm not bad at speaking. I'm pretty good at writing, pretty good at coming up with ideas. I just need to be able to communicate it. And I was on the ropes per se, because as soon as you become a CEO or founder, you have to communicate really well to a lot of parties. And some of them are not even going to like you. So you need to win people over. You need to close the gap, the trust gap on the people that you do have, and maybe have some sort of call to action for them once you get people to trust you. Okay, are you ready to buy the product? Okay, are you ready to invest? Do you want to partner? Do you see a long-term relationship there? I wish in the moment I had some sort of rule of thumb that I follow to be an eloquent speaker. I think some of it is just repetition and rehearsing. Some of it actually is staircase wit, which is something that you can train over time by putting yourself in high pressure situations. And I think a really good example of that is I've gotten much better at pitching my company because I put myself in a very high pressure situation when I was flown out to Hong Kong as a semifinalist in the North American region, and then ultimately for the world in a pitch competition. They paid for all my expenses, beautiful experience. You get on out there with 70 other companies, and they take you to the ICC in Hong Kong, which is this 108-story building. They bring you
Wow.
to the elevators inside. There's 3 judges and a TV camera that's blasting your face onto a screen. You go into that elevator, doors shut, and you have exactly 60 seconds from
Wow.
the time the elevator takes off, rockets up 100 floors, and the doors open again. And while you're going up, your ears are popping, the pressure is on, there's a lot of money at stake. You're in a different country. You've got these 3 people just staring at you with stone cold faces. That's really intense. And then after that, any sort of pitch just becomes so much easier, but you really train yourself to come up with stuff on the spot. And the concept of staircase wit in that case is if you're ever in an argument with someone or you're trying to present an idea, usually in the shower or much later, you're like, that's what I should have said. That's how I should have gone about this. That's how I should have framed this. And so you can actually get better at that where you come up with these rapid fire, intuitive or impromptu answers and the language that fulfills those answers really well, which you kind of saw on the spot right there. I was thinking, what's the best word? I don't think I meant intuitive. I think I meant impromptu, and just calling forth the vocabulary. And you get better at that over time if you just force yourself to do that. So that's a big portion of it, but it's a crazy evolution. I would agree. It feels like I've lived a lifetime already. A lot of founders feel that. You're doing everything. You're like, hey, I'm a marketer and a salesperson and a manager and HR and the product person. Like you're doing so much at once. It does feel like you've lived a whole life, or at least 10 years and a year's worth. So it's exciting that way.
Yeah. Speaking of T-shape company structure. I'm not sure if you saw it, but a T-shape is becoming very popular, which is essentially what you just said in the end of your answer. A T-shape founder, T-shape entrepreneur essentially explains that you go broad on various topics, but you focus. That's the when the vertical part of the letter T comes from, you narrow down on and become a master just one aspect of it. But you have to be good at marketing skills, hiring, firing, speaking, and all those. So that's why the T shape form. And I love the way you said evolution. I think Kaizen philosophy comes to mind here, or the first thing that came to my mind was that Kaizen philosophy where you do small and incremental changes, but a lot of people don't really approach it strategically enough, in my opinion. If you actually spend few minutes a day practicing your pitch, for example, preparing for that moment when you are in that elevator, it doesn't have to be in Hong Kong, maybe somewhere else, maybe on a Zoom call, but those moments come, right? So yeah, practice every single day for few minutes, whatever that is that you're trying to accomplish or whatever that will happen in the future. Then that's where the Kaizen comes into play, and that's why they have incredible companies that are going to continue to surprise us with all the technology and innovations and what have you. But yes, I was curious to hear your answer. So yeah, evolution is great, and you've lived so many lifetimes already. An author, music industry, producer, CEO, founder, solving so many different problems there along the way. So great to you. And one last note on that: Toastmasters. Have you heard about Toastmasters, public speaking club?
I have. I've never used it.
So I remember I joined the club when I moved to the United States because obviously English as a third language, I needed to figure out a way to improve my vocabulary and how I present. And I needed it for my professional life as well, for my career back then. Well, I still use it. We communicate all the time, and even now, right? So there is a part of every Toastmasters meeting. It's a very structured meeting. There's prepared speeches where you have 5 to 7 minutes, but in the middle of the meeting, you have that extemporaneous practice where impromptu, where it's called table topics, where someone is asking a random, there's always one person that comes up with those questions for each meeting, and then they pick a random victim, if you will. You have 3 to 5 seconds to come up with an answer on a random topic and explain for 1 to 2 minutes. And I remember last year or 2 years ago, there was a group of people from Fast Pitch industry company. I think it was a nonprofit called Fast Pitch something, and they needed to prepare for those fast pitches. For each of them had a foundation that they stood behind, or that they were behind those foundations, people behind those foundations, and they really needed to nail it down. So they took 6 months to practice for that 2 to 3 minutes. It wasn't 60 seconds, but it was 2 to 3 minutes fast pitches that they had to make. That is something that, again, is very useful for all of us here. So I'm glad you went through that experience already, and you're doing fantastically well.
The one thing that I would add, I had mentioned aggregate gains, and so, or maybe incremental gains, but there's also aggregate gains, which is finding a diverse range of attributes or skills that you're trying to improve upon and just doing a little bit at a time. So maybe you think, I want to get better at eye contact, so I'm just going to get a little bit better at that. And I'm also going to make sure that I use fewer filler words. And I'm going to think about my posture. You don't have to radically transform each of those elements overnight, but if you do a little bit across all of those fields, then what you see is over time that accumulates and you see the transformation. Because certainly there's no way that with one Zoom call or one Toastmasters or one pitch, you're going to become better. But if you find little things to work on, small enough that you could work on multiple little things at once and just let those play their course, you will get better over time. And I think that's the right way to approach it because it's not overwhelming. Just a little bit better, 1% better. And that's not too demanding.
I feel like we should have a school community where you would share content like this and teach other Gen Zs and maybe even older folks as well.
Well, so many people have said that actually this week alone. Yeah. And sorry to cut you off, but it excited me because you're not the first one to say that. And so you must be onto something. It must be time for me to get into the school community and consulting. I don't like consultants too much. I think that hands-on experience is much more valuable. And there was just this massive thing that came out about was it Starbucks, where this one CEO is from McKinsey and then they lose $30 billion of market cap. And then another CEO comes in who had real experience,
Oh,
wasn't a
wow. I
consultant,
heard.
and then turns the company around, right? So I've been playing with the idea. I'm just waiting for the right moment. And to be honest, if I were to take my own advice, you never wait for the right moment. You just get started and go out
Right.
there and do it. So maybe I'm testing the waters with the content to see if people are interested first in what I have to say before I jump the gun and try to monetize it.
Of course, yes. And I think, monetization is one part, but also building which is something I've seen recently, building your own tribe, if you will. I mean, community after all, is a sort of tribe, right? Where people that will look up to you. And I also firmly believe in a one third rule, I guess, or 33% sounds better. 33% rule where you should aim at spending one third of your time with people at your level, where you're at in life and business. Obviously, exchange ideas, see what's working, what's not working. Don't make the mistakes that someone else made in your peer groups. And then one third of the time you should aim to spend with people that are below your level, educate and teach them. Those are the guys that will, maybe even sometimes exceed your accomplishments, thanks to you, of course, which gives you a certain fulfillment as well. And then one third with people above you. Those are the guys that are giving back to you because they have what we don't have, 10, 20, 30 years or 40 years more of experience. In your case, probably even 50 years more of experience. So they've seen a lot of cycles, and they can obviously share their wisdom. And it's always good to listen to those who lived through some tougher times that we have right now. So yeah, that's something that, food for thought. Maybe I know you're doing so many different things, and you're moving at a God's speed. So maybe down the road would be a great way to document your journey as well, and keep it in a community, build your own tribe.
I think I'm reaching that inflection point. My life has gotten a lot more interesting as I've traveled internationally, which is something that we haven't touched on. So, in addition to being a serial entrepreneur and multifaceted founder, I am a public speaker as well. And not just to promote my own company, but I do real industry education, whether that's for real estate, blockchain, or artificial intelligence. And I travel the world doing this panels, keynotes, events need an expert to talk about a subject, they will reach out to me. Workshops or even one-on-one meetings or dinners, which would be more like 10 on one, right? So a roundtable discussion would be the right way to describe that. And this has brought me to very interesting locations. We'll see how interesting it gets. We were talking before the show, some of the places that I'm looking at. So of course I'm returning to Hong Kong. I could be going to Iran. We are working out the visa. But in addition to that, I've been in Japan and across the United States, in Honolulu, London, Ireland, Germany. So I will just continue to amass these. And I've been invited to speak in countries like Nigeria and South Africa. I can't always make it out there. There's costs associated with this. And sometimes it's not entirely reimbursed, or there's just unexpected costs that come up. But I mean, it's really fascinating to see myself in this position and the respect for the wisdom that I have accumulated and some of the insider knowledge or the insights that I have. But we'll see how far I can take this. I'm a bit of a thrill seeker, so I've joked if everything in Iran goes well, then I would love my next keynote to be on Everest or something like that, just putting myself in unique positions. And then that would certainly be a school community worth tuning into. Like, how did this guy go from just building up a LinkedIn page to having a company to giving keynotes in the weirdest parts of the world?
You already have a bunch of school community, tribe building, worthy stories to share. So you definitely, I stick to my words, and you've lived and accomplished far more than most of the people in their lifetime. Don't wait too long, but those are just incredible. I feel like you have a perfect balance between, traveling, like speaking, and also working on your startups and your projects. Because I know a lot of people that took public speaking so much to heart that that's pretty much all they do. I from my perspective, that would be just too much. Just I see them, traveling, but that became almost like full-time job at this point. They're just spent 10 months out of the year traveling. This is not something, I know it works for some people. This is not something that's too much for me. It's too much traveling for me, even if I wanted to do that, or ask or paid to do that. but I feel like you're keeping a great balance. You're collecting those stories and you're allowing your creativity juices to flow, because traveling, meeting those people, networking with different cultures and people in different aspects, different industries, gives you so much creativity, so many ideas, so many different views on things. I mean, it's just incredible. Moving on to building that ink. Tell us about that project startup. Who do you primarily serve and how? Let's talk about that now.
Sure. So I'm still in real estate. I'm still in blockchain and other new technologies like artificial intelligence. And I spent a long time trying to figure out how these really combine, what those crossroads are. And in order to do that, I had to talk to who my customer was, or at least the profile that I identified, which was the real estate developer. What problems are they facing in their day to day life? So that is who predominantly uses my um, our platform, some of their stakeholders as well, to dive into. I guess this would just be a good segue to dive into what we do. What's the life cycle of the product when it lands in the hands of one of these folks? So the first thing that I present to them is I ask about their data. How do you think about data? Where are you holding your data? What are you doing with your documents? Because there's one truth, which is that in the 21st century, data is the new oil.
Yes.
So you need to have a data driven culture and you need digitization plans. You need to have a process for drilling for this new oil and a way to process it and put it to use, turn it into something. So I go to these real estate developers, mid market, usually not quite institutional, but this benefits them as well. Any firm that's looking to scale. And I say, what are you doing with your data? And sometimes I'll say, well, we use one piece of software. I have Google Drive set up and we communicate on WhatsApp with my contractors and the repair people and whatnot. And I say, what if we could first consolidate all of that? Let's get you in one place. Let's get everyone looking at the same information in one place so that you're not dealing with all this fragmentation. And
Mm.
immediately, what this does is it resolves a lot of friction that exists in this industry because you're dealing with dislocation, you're dealing with silos, you're dealing with disconnect or data asymmetry or opacity issues or information that is outdated, manipulated, corrupted, wrong file type. So let's just get everything into one place. We're all handling the same file, a single source of truth for you. And for people who have dealt in real estate, you know that there's a lot of hours spent chasing people down, chasing files down, doing rework, checking which version this is. And then you hand it off to another party and they say, well, I need to review this. We need to audit this. I need another opinion on it, especially as you're going for an appraisal or an insurance company. Like they're going to do all their due diligence and you have a repeat of the same process over and over and all those hours get billed back to you. Or it's just lost time when you're already on a time constraint. So how do we remove all that friction? That's what I present to them first and foremost. Like let's get your data in one place. I want you to be able to harness it comfortably and confidently. And so the first product that we push in their direction is a data room. And then they'll say, okay, this is cool. Is it like Dropbox? And I say, well, does Dropbox know what to do with your files? Because our platform called Building, so clearly designed for real estate, knows what to do with your files, knows how to organize them, structure them, present them to the right stakeholders, use them in AI tools. Cool, much better than Dropbox and hardly much more expensive. So that's really nice. Then I start to ask them, all right, if you have your data points, what would you like to accomplish? Where are your bottlenecks? Are you looking to streamline the construction process? Are you looking for financing? Are you trying to impress a buyer because you're selling your property? Maybe it's just improve operations. Where are your bottlenecks? And I do this because the sky is the limit when it comes to data. It can literally be used for anything from filing environmental reports to coordinating or keeping track of your subcontractors just to make sure that they did good work and everyone gets paid fairly. So leaving it to them to identify, and this is just almost like my salesperson persona, trying to figure out what's the biggest problem so that I can sell you some medicine for it because it makes selling a lot easier and let them do the talking in that way. But with a multifaceted tool, almost like a Swiss Army knife for real estate data, that's the right approach because I don't want to be selling you a saw when you need a toothpick or whatever. So start asking them those questions. And then they'll tell me. And so we've got the data, we've organized it. It's nice and friendly. They can find everything. All their stakeholders can log in. They're all looking at the same documents. Nothing's leaving the platform. You're not exporting files, version 2.3, emailing it. Then one person already has a different copy, and that copy could become outdated because now back at the farm, we've made some adjustments and updated information. And it's like, okay, here's version 2.4, and just trying to keep track of all that. So data in one place. Start asking them what they're trying to accomplish with it, putting together a business plan. So how can we help you? What's the scope? What are you trying to accomplish here? How can we be useful? We have tons of different use cases, from accelerating the appraisal process and increasing precision. Because we have all the data, we can push for data-driven appraisals and accurate, um, almost applying a premium to evaluation because of the transparency, the reduced risk, and then lower cost of capital. Or one other thing that we get into is, are you looking to tokenize? And I won't dive too much into what this is, but I'll tell you one thing. There's a big trend happening in real estate and capital markets, which is that they're digitizing, they're starting to move at the speed of the internet. And so I always slip in that use case as well. Hey, you have an asset, there's a lot of value locked in this. What if we unlock some of that value and let you transact it really quickly at the speed of the internet, move it around, let your investors move it around, and whatever benefits you get from that, reinvesting into more projects or whatnot, presenting to them the use cases of this data product. And then it sounds like you got a question, or looks like it. So I'll add in one more thing. I believe that two-dimensional data is very 20th century. Everything is 3D nowadays. Think of the videos we watch or the video games you play, or you've got metaverse and augmented reality. So we do help bring some of that data to life in a digital twin. Think of this as a 3D model of that property. So no longer are you just looking at reports of maintenance or warranties, and then you've got all these components and you've labeled them and trying to track stuff down. No, we want you to visualize your property and all of its data as well, where you can, in your browser, pull up that property. You're looking at your property either because you've used BIM, or you made a 3D model out of your drawings, or we've scanned the property. You're looking at your property. You can go around and click on that and see, when was this item replaced? Who was responsible for that? What's the value for this? What's the depreciation schedule? And that, I think, shocks a lot of these real estate developers. Not only are they holding on to their data's in one place, now it's being used, but to see it come to life and to be able to interact with it and not get lost in the silly file names or the stuff that's confusing, but using what humans are best at, our spatial capabilities, and navigating your properties like never before. So that's like our two big products that we offer. But I'll take a step back because I threw everything at you.
I told everyone we're going to talk about the future, and obviously we are talking about the future here, but a future and the present time as well, because that's already happening. I absolutely admire how with every projects you approached in your life, you were looking for ways to stand out and for ways for it to be extremely useful for the users, someone who can benefit from it the most from all angles, like the 360 view on everything. In this case, property ownership, real estate. I'd be looking for financing, organization. I mean, there's so many different things that come with real estate. A lot of people online make it sound like it's passive. Not always passive, depends on the situation, but in many cases, it's not really passive. One thing that I wanted to ask in the beginning, actually, so I'll start with that. What about security? How safe is your data? Data is oil. Obviously, oil needed to be stored somewhere, transported, sold, etc. Data needs to be secured. Otherwise, there's breaches. Cybersecurity is a big thing. What can you tell us about the security of it?
That's a fantastic question, because actually, right now, with the current methods, how people store and move data leaves room for intervention or air leaks, or areas where an outside source can interject, a third party can interject. And you really want a walled garden for your data, as opposed to your data being in transit, documents being in transit between different parties and across different systems and different files and getting lost somewhere. You need to be able to keep track of that and make sure that it's under guard, that there's a permission system in place, and that the right people are looking at it at the right times, and that it's logged when that occurs. And that's what this sort of system ensures. Now, I should note that we are not owners or holders of your data. We're stewards of the real estate data. And this is because we still want the owner of that property to have sovereignty and autonomy over the information. Ultimately, it's their trade secrets, it's their intellectual property. And so we're saying, hey, we're going to help you lasso it, get a hold of it, get it in one place so that there aren't these opportunities for information to be leaked or to get lost or to be forgotten or corrupted and manipulated. Let's have it in a secure environment. And then to go a step further, we give everything a digital fingerprint using the blockchain. Every single institution is investigating use cases for blockchain because they understand the security, immutability, and auditability that this technology offers. And so we are taking that same institutional approach and applying it now to property documentation and offering these digital fingerprints so that you can see when something gets changed or if it has. And so can people who are coming into the system, into your walled garden with your permission and looking at that. And we call this actually the golden copy of information. And in the United Kingdom, they call this the golden thread, which is this unraveling over time of information. And you can go and look back across a timeline. You know, if you imagine a spool of thread and you're unraveling it, you're going to have this line that's growing over time. But to be able to look back and see a golden copy of your information at any point. And so it's a system of security and trust that is relatively unprecedented in real estate. This is an industry that is complex, subject to manipulation. You're going to have your skeletons in the closet. And this leads to all sorts of trust issues and risk. Certainly, it's why this is a private market, because there's all sorts of speculation and unknowns. And essentially, we are saying, well, what if it didn't have to be that way? What if it was transparent to the right people? And what if we had confidence in trading or investing or underwriting these assets and could do that really quickly, the same way that we do that with the companies that are publicly listing themselves? And how do we take those benefits of publicly listing and bring it to the people who are just managing a couple properties, essentially? So I mean, I digress because that's, again, worth its own topic. That's kind of the tokenization route. But this is a really cool opportunity to harness information and to protect it, to take control over what's truly yours as a property owner, and then to monetize it. This is a big opportunity as well. And there's a couple different ways that you can monetize your data. I was just in Dublin, Ireland, giving a keynote to a room full of architects, engineers, contractors, and operators, amongst other titles. And the keynote was about turning four-dimensional data, so you got 3D data and then data over time, but ultimately data, into value. And how does that happen? And there's a few different ways that you monetize that, whether you are improving the top line of your property, so what it's overall worth, maybe through data, we make a more compelling argument for the valuation of the property, and you have a more competitive cap rate, lower risk, lower cost of capital. You're bringing in more money through rent, looking at market trends and ensuring that you are in alignment with that in your comps. And then bottom line, with data, can we make better decisions, which streamline some sort of process or workflow? It's saving us hours, therefore it's saving us time, right? Automation, it's everyone's dream. Can an AI do it for me? AI needs data, so you can see the connecting points there. And now you have saved more money, which is an improved bottom line. So that's a form of monetization. And then on the topic of the future, what we're going to see is that intellectual property, so actual ideas, are monetized. And this happens a little bit. Technically, when you go out and hire an architect, you're paying for their intellect to get a job done right. But there's different ways to monetize that intellectual property and all the different formats that it comes in. And what you're going to see is attribution. And this is very, very important in the age of artificial intelligence, because for the past 30 years, artificial intelligence has been feeding off of all of our identities and intellectual property, and none of us have received attribution. Billions of humans have been data farmed, and everything about us and all of the way that we're able to identify a fire hydrant in a CAPTCHA or move things around, or the way that we type into Google, that's been harnessed by these search engines or these corporations and whatnot. And now you have AI tools and agents that people pay for. So we were used to make another company rich. And you can start to see in specialized industries where someone's maybe decades of architectural or engineering knowledge and wisdom is being farmed the same way. It's already happening where people will create designs, maybe in Autodesk, and then that's used. So their intellectual property is being used to train models, and then those models might become generative AI, and we'll start using AI instead to design a property, but using the the work that was performed by people in the past, and they're not receiving anything from that. And so ultimately what we want to do is that if you have your data, you've gone through the work of capturing it, you put it in one place, you're putting it to good use. At some point, you're probably going to use it in AI. And depending on how that AI tool is set up, it could be benefiting from your data, your intellectual property, and making that company rich. So the concept is that if artificial intelligence can be audited back to the source information, so the information that it was trained on, and then every time it reuses that to come to a conclusion, if there can be some sort of payment back to the producer of that information. I mean, technically speaking, ChatGPT is trained on all of us. What if we got $1 back every time that something we came up with is used by ChatGPT in someone else's idea? That's the concept at large.
That's a good topic, good idea right there, and I mean, good future for all those who contribute. And I'm grateful that, and the beauty about content online now, that you can stop it and go back to it. We're not live; we can rewatch it, and I'm sure a lot of people will rewatch that part of that moment from the conversation, because there's a lot that you covered there. One thing that, or few thoughts that I wanted to share with you here is, one, transparency and simplification. If you think about what you're actually here building here, is that and the reason why I chose the word transparency is that, first of all, you have all the data, you feed the information about your building and everything associated with the building. And there's a lot, usually, especially on the commercial scale. So that's one thing. You have everything in one place. The second thing here is that if the building changes the ownership, which happens often, the beauty about real estate is that you come in, you have your ideas, your intellectual properties, your approach, your vision, you upgrade things, you hire the best people you think they are the best people, or the most cost effective people, whatever that is, and you essentially do your thing, benefit from it. Usually real estate is associated with tax benefits and breaks there. Then I come in, or someone else comes in, and now within one platform, they don't get a stack of papers that no one reads. They can have access within, maybe even during the transaction, ideally during the transactions, have access to a platform where you have literally everything, the history of the building, all the drawings, all the past projects that were done on the property, and all those things that are actually so much worth for the new ownership. So yeah, that simplifies everything and keeps things transparent. I know you want to say something on that, so please
Yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
like a Carfax, to be honest, where you're getting a history of maintenance and ownership and maybe liens on this property. And that, when that hands over to the next owner, that is super valuable. You could go a step further. We were talking about BD data, then it's like an MRI of the property, to scan it and see what's the health state of this property at a given time. So when a new owner comes in, they're not just obtaining the property, they're not just purchasing that, but they're receiving all the data and intellectual property and the metadata that
Mm,
surrounds that. The stuff that you technically can't see in real life, but you would see in a platform like this. The millions of data points, the processes, the workflows, the careful care that has gone into ensuring that this is a successful property, because properties, again, are complex. They're not just stone, brick, metal, wood. They are functioning organisms practically. And I'm a systems person, so it's not just where the property exists, but what's around it. What's going on there? What devices are there? What's the urban planning here? Who are the people who interact with that? So all of that information is just as valuable. And you can quickly see how this would add premium to the property. You're not just reducing discounts, because right now, if you and I disagree on the price, I say, hey, I'm not sure this is worth so much because it looks like the maintenance has been spotty and not keen on the market. So let's bring down the price $1 million. So not only can we remove that discount, that contingency and the risk, but we can start to realize premiums because of the surplus of data workflows and then metadata. So not just data points about the property, but who, what, where, why, when, how. That's just as valuable too. Because if I give you a receipt of paper right now and I say my company's worth $1 million, you're going to say, who came up with this? How did you come up with this? Why? When did you come up with this number? All of those big questions. So that's metadata about the data. The data is that it's $1 million. The metadata tells you why it's $1 million. So you bundle all of this together. That's a good deal.
That vision right there. And also, you've mentioned surroundings of the property. So, are you saying that you can, or you already have this on the platform, have access to the information in that particular community or surrounding communities or developments that are happening? Maybe some real-time data that is not being fed directly from the owners, but perhaps is, being published in the local newspaper or something like that, or the city hall has, publishing some information. Maybe some institutions are being built, universities, schools, whatever, etc., or roads being redone, or freeways, forests destroyed to build freeways, what have you. So all the things that can happen are happening that can either increase or decrease the value of the property. I mean, we have Disney here coming, building for the last 10 years, a huge property in the middle of Coachella Valley where we live, and there will be parks and sort of, I think, yeah, like fake beaches, parks, these condos, like condo community that you can purchase. There will be restaurants and all kinds of things. So that has such a huge impact that you can see already properties, even land around that area being, doubling and tripling every year. So do you think that is possible, or do you already have something in mind like that and for the platform?
Well, it's possible and very important. We're not going to fetch that information for you because there are third parties that are much more qualified to do that. Again, we're the facilitator or the steward of that information. When that information is collected, though, to make it known and to make it accessible is sort of the idea here. And then to start contributing it to capital markets. So if we see valuations being created for lots of properties and they are transacting, and so we see a valuation, we trust it, and then if we're able to audit that back to source data, which is what a system like this would offer, and there's some nuance to that because it raises questions about privacy and transparency. You don't always want all of your inputs revealed,
Mm.
but let's say that it goes through building and we can guarantee through a series of checks and balances that the input is good, and so you don't have to see it in order to trust it, and then therefore the valuation is accurate and any other market information, then you can start to transact faster with utmost confidence. Because what I look at now, whether it's broker produced valuations or pretty much just estimates, or if it's an actual third party mark, the frequency of this is far and few between. And then even some of their own logic is sort of sketchy. It's
Mm.
based off of what they can find publicly about these transactions, historical transactions on comparable properties. And it's just not enough to make a compelling argument for a lot of these properties. It's how the industry currently functions, but this is an industry that's held together with shoestring and bubblegum. If you want real estate, particularly the commercial properties, to be taken more seriously and to have reduced risk and to have higher performance in capital markets, and we need to move them into something where it has the same functionality as equities or bonds or money market funds. And so you take some of those attributes and you say, well, how do we apply that in real estate? Maybe that means auditable inputs and standardized information and frameworks. And we need lots of recent data, not just once every 5 years and going off of that. Maybe we need monthly marks on these properties or weekly marks or daily so that we can make sure that our balance sheets look good and that our books are great and that we've got the right amount of money in our reserves and that we're properly collateralized. So there's just this domino effect or this chain reaction that occurs when you start to get the data in, trust the data, and then activate that data somewhere. And this is interesting part of the conversation because, well, it shows the variety of use cases for a product like this. On the one hand, maybe you're just looking at orchestrating your IoT devices. So you've got sensors and servers and cameras and solar panels and all this stuff going on. Maybe you're just trying to connect that stuff. Platform like this does that. Maybe you are looking to appraise your property and you want the best bang for your buck or the most. We can do that. Maybe you are interested in our roadmap and our vision of how capital markets evolve when all this information is flowing and attested and trusted. And what does the future of capital markets look like there? What happens when real estate starts moving at the speed of the internet? And how many trillions of dollars does that unlock? And at a global scale, right? If money moves from a German family office into a Hong Kong asset, and then it's being used in a financial instrument created by a US institution. These are crazy times. I mean, just the fact that you and I are on a call virtually when 20 years ago, maybe it would be a phone call. And then 20 years before that, well, phone's still around, but probably meeting in person if we really wanted to get something done. So in the span of a couple decades, a few decades, we are virtually seeing each other. We're moving information. How does that, how does that start to manifest in real estate as well and all the things behind real estate? It's totally crazy. This is to real estate what like quantum computing is to the current computing or processing power now.
No, I agree. And there's so much that can be improved in that industry. I mean, I've done several transactions from an agent's perspective, and the amount of signatures and initials you have to make on a single residential property, forget about commercial, which I've experienced in as well. It's just insane. And there's so many things that can go wrong in every transaction, but that's also the beauty of it. And transparency is definitely key. And I love that you're contributing to that element of those puzzles, which is real estate. I'll be curious to hear, how do you attract, or how do they find, how real estate owners find you, or maybe are those maybe brokers instead of the real estate owners directly that are interested in keeping things in one place and keeping them secure in one place? And how do they find out about you, or how do you approach them?
I would venture to say that it's all been inbound so far. We've been very careful about what projects we bring on and at what rate because we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We know that we are an early stage company and we want satisfied customers, and you have to figure out partnerships and have the right stack and have confident pricing by putting out LinkedIn posts and speaking at events and having introductions. It has brought us quite a bit of traction and enough for now. Eventually we need to mobilize that into an outbound strategy, but I think we're doing okay. And this circles back to the public speaking portion. I don't go out and shill. I'm not self-promoting our work when I go to these places and speak. It's purely educational and people appreciate that. Some of it does trickle down into the company. They see the brand, they see me, and then they investigate further and want to learn more. And so it helps that way. And to me, that's perfectly acceptable to put money into travel and speaking. And to be honest, I don't have to sponsor events. I don't have to buy a seat at the table. I'm invited. So it's a good use. It's pretty capital efficient, to be honest. I just buy the plane ticket and then, the ROI is there. Some people spend money on ads. This is what I do. And I believe, there can be real return on ad spend, but the physical presence and the social media posts that I can produce coming out of that's what I do. So I mean, the public speaking portion or just the social media stuff, we're going on podcasts, putting it out there, building up the brand. That's attracted enough to us for now.
It's a form of, I see brand building as a form of equity. So you're putting essentially a lot of efforts into building your equity here, and
Yep.
that pays off. And obviously, it's maybe not as as simple as return on your ad spend on Meta or Google or LinkedIn, but it definitely is going to bring those returns. And let's not forget about all the skills and the incremental and improvements that you're making, that as we covered earlier. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm not curious. It's good to hear that LinkedIn is working well. I mean, after all, they have 100 million daily active users, 1 billion plus users in general, which big portion of them are active on a daily basis. So it is a platform where a lot of businesses can establish their presence, build presence, leave a digital footprint, and grow company at the rate that is most desired for them. And I'm glad you're able to find that as part of the market for you as well, part of the audience there for you as well. And I continue to enjoy your posts, especially those from traveling abroad and bringing those cool stories back with you. The last part of the conversation is a bit philosophical, and I've been thinking about how to approach it because most of the guests previously were 40 years, 50 years, 30 years into their journeys, who are you're definitely experienced, I have to say, but you're obviously younger as you divulged that information at the beginning of the conversation. So I'll start with the question about fulfillment. What gives you at your current endeavors, what gives you the most fulfillment and why?
Well, I have a massive impact on the industry, on other people, and it's a really unique opportunity to be able to do that. Maybe I was in the right place at the right time, but to know that the actions that I take in building my startup, in educating others, in producing solutions that I think will create positive innovation in the world, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And even when times are tough, I think this is legacy. This is monumental impact beyond my physical existence. This is something that goes for generations if done right. Because sure, real estate software is one portion of this, but I'm also heavily involved in smart cities and everything entangled in that. For some people that can raise an eyebrow, what is a smart city? And to me, it's just a combination of urban planning, environmentalism, people and infrastructure, the systems that govern that, and just thinking about what's best for people, not necessarily some of the connotations that come out of it nowadays. And so to be contributing to that and designing what civilization looks like now and in the future, that's powerful. That's really powerful. And that's why I like real estate so much. These aren't just buildings, they're not just markets. This is everything known to humankind. That's what the built environment is. Every single structure that has been created started as an idea and teams came together and then it was erected. Now people live there. People spend their lives there. They have memories in that. They work there. This is all that we will ever know. To me, I can't understate that. That is incredible. That's what the built environment is. And I have a role in that. I have a role in shaping that and the conversation around that. That's really cool. That's fulfilling. So I'm blessed to be in this position and to do it at the scale that I am starting to do it at. How cool is that?
You clearly understood the keyword here, philosophical. Thank you so much for your answer here. I love that. Next question typically is, what advice would you give to your younger self if you had an opportunity to just sit across the table from 10, 20, 30 years ago? But in your case, I'll ask, after now knowing, or that now that I know that you've gone through being an author, day trading, being in so many different industries, real estate, finance, now also blockchain, smart cities, smart contracts, I can imagine, and all kinds of things that will raise eyebrows, tokenization of things, the Internet of Things. You've mentioned so many different keywords that will raise eyebrows for sure. Is there anything that you would do differently throughout your journey, starting with your first entrepreneurial endeavors and when you were 16, 17? Is there anything that you would do differently? That's my question for you now.
Not fundamentally, but tactically. I would be a lot less stressed if I had more money. So
Mm.
it's great that I've been working on startups and entrepreneurial endeavors for as long as I've known, but it's not something that has made me a lot of money. In fact, it just costs me money over and over again. And day trading didn't help, right? That made the problem worse. So I think that some supplemental income and just making sure that I had a nice cushion, nice support can make it much easier to run companies. At the end of the day, you do need capital. I'm fortunate enough that I have people who believe in me. Well, I guess saying I'm fortunate that people believe in me sounds like I don't deserve it, right? We have a company here. We're working hard. We have long lasting relationships with these folks, and the deals are structured very fair to both sides. But that has assisted a lot because those investments have empowered what we do and has got us into a lot of these places when I'm not able to financially cover that. So I'm thankful for the people who believe in our brand as its own asset that is making building and its corporate structure more valuable. And so they're willing to put me out there and they say, yeah, absolutely. Couple $1,000s for this trip and all the publicity we're going to get out of it. Yeah, that's worth it. And again, in so many of these, I don't even have to sponsor the events. I don't have to buy a seat. So I'm getting a good deal. That's all I think I would really change because most of my problems, I like solving problems related to the company, but most of the actual stuff that keeps me up at night is financially related. Like, how do we get more money? How do I get more money? How do I make sure bills are paid? So I think going back in time, just ensuring that I have the support that I need ahead of time and having some sort of plan there. Of course, it's not too late to implement that, but it would have been helpful earlier on. That said,
Well,
I always told myself, burn the ships, like have no plan B. It's a really good idea, but still make sure that you and your army are equipped with like food and weapons and armor. Like, don't throw that away with the ship as well.
I agree, and good advice right there. I feel like that's the main reason why United States is still the best place for entrepreneurs. Gives you the most amount of freedom. I don't know. When the moment I came here and I decided that I'll move and pursue the naturalization process and become a U.S. citizen, which I did 3 or 4 years ago, there was this sense of freedom that I could not experience anywhere else, including my own country where I was born, that I love and will forever love and be grateful for, and continue to talk about that. But yes, it's something, that sense of freedom that America provides for entrepreneurs in all kinds of ages. So yeah, being feeling blessed here as well. Thank you so much for sharing. My final question for you, Mr. Fountain of Wisdom, is I love to end the conversation with a positive note, something optimistic, enthusiastic. So let's do that as well here today. What are you excited about the most in the near future?
Traveling, probably.
Travel.
There's a reason that I make all these travel plans, and it's because I look forward to them. I like to see new places, experience the culture, make new friends, and hope that at some point I get to return and look forward to that as well. So again, I'm speaking in some pretty cool places. Some of them returning, others new and exhilarating. That's super cool to me. And I will be sure to document it and the experience that I get out of that. If it teaches me anything about entrepreneurship or just life in general and sharing that, maybe it inspires other people, opens their eyes to different parts of the world. So I think that's it. Just like getting on a plane and going to somewhere I haven't been before. That's something that I look forward to. Now, of course, there's business milestones and other cool stuff, but travel it's a combination of all of that, actually.
Yes. Even though I'm not a Gen Z, please don't forget to inviting me to your school community when it's live. Please document as much as possible. We'd love to see those stories on LinkedIn and maybe even YouTube for longer format, and document your thoughts, your journey, your experiences with us, so we can feel this as well. And those who can't travel that much or as often as you do will experience those cool stories as well, cool moments with you. Continue to build your brand, continue to invest in that equity, and yeah, ship those updates for building that ink. I think this is phenomenal platform, and I wish and I look forward to seeing it in 20, 30 years from now and where it's going to be. And maybe this will be, a combination of those smart cities and what all the other aspects we covered today. Matt, it was an absolute honor. Thank you so much. Hope, and I know that this is not our last conversation, so I'll definitely look forward to reconvening in the near future. And yeah, I will. You have +1 fan from this conversation already, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks a million.